Chapter 3. The Haunted Grave. After that, Hu Guohua enlisted in the army and quickly became favored for his abilities. However, in that chaotic era, warlords battled incessantly, with small troops seizing territories only to lose them shortly thereafter. The warlord Hu Guohua served under was not powerful, and within a year his forces were scattered by a rival. His benefactor, the warlord leader, was killed in the skirmishes. Following the defeat, Hu Guohua returned home to find his family's dilapidated house had collapsed. Penniless and having not eaten for days, his addiction to opium flared up. Desperate, he sold his pistol to bandits for some food and opium, just enough to stave off the immediate crisis. Realizing this was no long-term solution, he remembered the words of the spirit that once possessed the paper effigy of a woman. When he had nothing left, he should seek out a grave without a tombstone in the desolate burial grounds of Shi Li Pu, where her bridal dowry of gold and silver jewelry was buried with her. Having grown bolder from his time as a soldier, Hu Guohua recalled tales of grave robbing, known in common parlance as turning the jar. It was a way to quick wealth, but punishable by death. So he waited until night, when a crescent moon hung faintly in the sky, a phenomenon the villagers called a hairy moon, believed to herald winds and the wandering of lost spirits. Arriving at the graves, he fortified himself with liquor. The cold moon, the whistling wind, and the flickering ghost fires among the tombstones were enough to chill anyone to the bone. Despite the alcohol, Hu Guohua was terrified, his earlier bravado soaked away in sweat. Gathering his courage, Hu Guohua tremblingly reached the center of the vast graveyard, where indeed stood a solitary grave without a tombstone. Among the desolate and wild graves, this particular one was strikingly odd. The grave, lacking a headstone, was even more peculiar for its coffin placement, not buried under a mound of earth, but instead standing upright, half exposed. The coffin appeared new, with 18 layers of bright vermilion lacquer shimmering eerily in the dim moonlight. Hu Guohua wondered about the strange positioning of the coffin. "What oddity is this?" he thought. "But since I'm here, not checking would be a wasted journey." He reasoned that dying of starvation or opium withdrawal was as good as being strangled by a ghost. Resigned to his fate, he decided to go through with it. With his mind made up, Hu Guohua began to dig around the half-buried coffin, revealing it fully. Exhausted from the effort due to his addiction, he didn't immediately open the coffin. Instead, he sat down and took a sniff of his opium paste, which stimulated his brain and nerves. Gritting his teeth, he stood up and pried open the coffin lid. Inside lay a beautiful woman, her features lifelike, but her face heavily made up. Her cheeks were daubed with thick rouge, contrasting sharply with her powdered face, and she was dressed in a bridal gown of bright red silk, adorned with a phoenix crown and shawl. This corpse was not the same woman Hu Guohua had seen 2 years ago. Even if the corpse had been fresh at burial, it should have decayed over 2 years. Could she have become a zombie? At that moment, Hu Guohua's focus shifted solely to the jewelry adorning the corpse and the silver ingots wrapped in red paper beside her, along with numerous gold bars, too many to count. As he reached for an emerald ring on the corpse's hand, the corpse suddenly flipped its arm and grabbed his wrist with incredible strength, its long, hook-like nails sinking deep into his flesh. Hu Guohua was gripped by excruciating pain and fear, unsure what to do next. The corpse opened its eyes, emitting a chilling cold from its gaze that made Hu Guohua tremble as if he had fallen into an icy pit, his breath visible in the air. With a cold laugh, the corpse said, "So you are indeed blinded by greed. For money, you lowlifes would do anything, right? Your heart and liver seem useless to you. I'll take them first." Hearing this, Hu Guohua panicked. "No, please no." But the corpse, unheeding, tore open his shirt and with a swift slash of her nails, plucked out his beating heart. She grabbed it and swallowed it whole without chewing. Hu Guohua was astonished. Looking down, he saw a scar on his chest, but felt no pain, only a growing haziness in his mind, as if his very essence had been taken. He prostrated himself before the corpse. The corpse, sitting atop the vertical coffin, coldly said to Hu Guohua, "You are now my puppet. I won't treat you unfairly. Bring me the hearts and livers of 88 women to this graveyard, and if there's any mistake, your life will be the first I take." Hu Guohua dared not disobey, realizing that the corpse was a century-old demon who had lured him to dig up her grave. She intended to force him to bring innocent women for her to consume their hearts. Once she had consumed 64 hearts, not even gods could subdue her. Hu Guohua fled from the graveyard in terror, having lost control of his bodily functions. Returning home, he first stole a pair of pants from a neighbor to replace his soiled ones. He was troubled, without a wife, and had no idea where to find women for the demon. He sensed something vital missing, but couldn't recall what it was. It was incredibly important, and failing to find women for the demon meant certain death. Lost in thought, he suddenly felt the gold bars in the pocket of the pants he had just changed into, rewards from the corpse. With a frown, he thought of a devious plan. To save his life, he would have to betray his conscience. The thought of conscience felt odd, but he couldn't ponder it further. Survival was paramount, even if it meant being immoral. The next morning at the crack of dawn, Hu Guohua headed to the county town to exchange his gold bars for silver dollars. After indulging himself in the pleasures of an opium den, he spent 10 silver dollars to buy a girl of about 17 or 18 from a village nestled in a poor mountain ravine. Although the early years of the Republic of China had officially outlawed the sale of humans, the dire poverty forced many to sell their sons and daughters. The law was a mere formality, powerless against the rampant practice. Having purchased the young girl, Hu Guohua reassured her on their journey that he had bought her to be his wife, and not to worry. Their life together would be one of comfort and luxury. The girl, named Xiao Kui, was shy, her face flushed, and she dared not look up at him, silently allowing him to lead the way. Hu Guohua led a small donkey, on which Xiao Kui rode, and they set out under the cover of a moonless, windy night towards the desolate graves of Shilipu. The mountain path was rugged and difficult, and Hu Guohua, anxious not to miss the auspicious hour, hastened on his journey. Along the way, he encountered Master Sun, a geomancer known throughout the province for his extraordinary abilities. Blessed with the sight of yin and yang, Master Sun could not only discern feng shui and tell fortunes, but was also skilled in the mysterious arts of divination and the 5 elements. Upon laying eyes on Hu Guohua, Master Sun immediately sensed a dark aura surrounding him. Calculating with his fingers, he was startled by his findings and quickly intercepted Hu. "Sir, what urgent matter drives you in such haste?" he inquired. Hu Guohua, growing impatient, dismissed him. "I have urgent business. Do not block my path." Master Sun raised his voice sternly. "I need to ask you one thing, you walking corpse. Where is your heart and liver?" Struck by the gravity of his words, Hu Guohua fell to his knees, pleading for Master Sun's help. Master Sun helped him to his feet. "Although you have erred, you have not committed grave sins. Knowing to turn back is the way to salvation, and it is not difficult for me to save you. But first, you must take me as your master and quit your opium addiction." To Hu Guohua, quitting opium seemed a fate worse than death. Yet, upon reflection, life was indeed more precious than the drug. Better to live on and hope for recovery, he thought. First, let me seek his help to escape the clutches of the undead woman. Later, I can find ways to indulge without his knowledge. Having resolved his plan, he kowtowed 8 times to Master Sun right there on the mountain path, accepting him as his master. Master Sun then took charge, instructing Hu Guohua on what to do while staying at a distance to ensure his safety. When the moon reached its zenith, Hu Guohua, accompanied by Xiao Kui, arrived at the desolate graveyard of Shilipu. The undead woman had been waiting, and impatient upon their arrival, she berated Hu Guohua before hastily seizing Xiao Kui to devour her heart. However, with a ghastly scream, the undead tore Xiao Kui's body to shreds, revealing her true form as a mere paper effigy, a decoy prepared by Master Sun. The heart that the undead consumed was actually a black donkey's hoof hidden inside the effigy, a most vile object, especially potent against zombies and similar creatures. Realizing she had been tricked, the undead's rage turned towards Hu Guohua, but he had already distanced himself. She howled to the sky as her clothes turned to ashes and her flesh to blood, leaving nothing but a skeletal frame on the ground. Master Sun, witnessing from afar, hurried over and extracted a chicken egg-sized crimson elixir from the skeleton, commanding Hu Guohua to swallow it. His heart and liver were thus restored to their rightful place. Together, they placed the bones back into the red coffin. As they were about to seal the coffin, the skull leapt up, spewing a cloud of black mist at Master Sun, who was caught off guard and enveloped by the chilling miasma. Yet, with seasoned composure, he quickly closed the coffin lid, hammered it shut with long nails, and crisscrossed it with ink lines from his ink brush, sealing the coffin as if with a net of ink lines akin to a Go game board. Master Sun had been afflicted by the zombie's toxic breath and was seriously injured. After the ordeal, he could barely move. He directed Hu Guohua to gather kindling and burn the red coffin. Hu Guohua obeyed, setting the coffin ablaze. The fire roared, sending plumes of black smoke into the air, an unbearable stench lingering until all was reduced to ashes. Only then did Hu Guohua remember the treasures within the coffin, and with regretful stomps, he lamented his late realization. He had no choice but to support his master, collect Xiao Kui, and retire to Master Sun's home. Afterwards, Master Sun used a secret formula to cure Hu Guohua's addiction to opium, and taught him the skills of feng shui and fortune-telling. Hu Guohua set up a small stall in the county town, earning a modest living by telling fortunes and finding auspicious grave sites. He married Xiao Kui, grateful for his master's life-saving grace, and began to live a good and honest life. However, Master Sun never fully recovered from the toxic zombie breath that had penetrated his bones during their encounter. A few years later, he passed away. On his deathbed, Master Sun summoned Hu Guohua and said, "Our bond as master and disciple was short-lived, and I regret not having the chance to teach you all I know. Here is an ancient book, the 16-character Yin and Yang Feng Shui secret technique. It's incomplete. Only half of the volume remains, and it contains minor techniques for feng shui and locating grave sites. Keep it as a memento." With those final words, Master Sun passed away. Hu Guohua buried his master and, during his spare time, studied the book left to him. Gradually, he learned its secrets and gained some fame in the county for selecting auspicious burial sites, and his family wealth slowly grew. Xiao Kui bore Hu Guohua a son, whom they named Hu Yunshuan. At the age of 17, Hu Yunshuan went to study at an English church school in the provincial capital. He was an active and unrestrained young man, influenced by revolutionary thoughts. Dreaming of revolutionary uprisings every night, he eventually left home to join the revolution in Yan'an. Hu Yunshuan later joined the army and rose through the ranks. By the time of the Huaihai campaign, he was a regiment commander in the 3rd Field Army's 6th Column. After the crossing of the Yangtze River, he moved south with his troops and settled in the south. Then came me. I was born on the Army Day, so my father named me Hu Jianjun. However, when I went to kindergarten, there were 7 or 8 other children named Jianjun, so my name was changed to Hu Bai. Hu Guohua commented, "This is a good change, like matching a single card, Hu, with 8,000,001 dots in mahjong." When I turned 18, our family faced some difficulties. My grandfather, who had spent his life selecting grave sites for others, ended up being cremated, a testament to life's unpredictability. He had a passion for collecting antiques, but none were preserved except for the partial volume of the 16-character Yin and Yang Feng Shui secret technique, which he instructed me to wrap in oilcloth and hide on the roof of a public restroom. Back then, young people had 3 choices after graduation: joining the army, working in the city, or going to the countryside as part of the Down to the Countryside movement. The first option was the best, offering both personal development and future job placement. The second option was decent, allowing one to earn wages. The most unfortunate were those without connections or who came from families affected by political campaigns. They had no choice but to join the countryside movement. One might think staying home was a fourth option, but that wasn't possible. Everyone was considered a useful part of socialist society. If you stayed home, representatives from the neighborhood committee, schools, and youth offices would constantly visit to persuade you. Some, however, resisted until the end and never joined the movement, eventually finding jobs in the city. In China, things are often unclear. The more you live, the more confused you become, never fully understanding the rules, and not everyone grasps the unspoken rules. I was too young and naive to understand the implications of going to the countryside. Joining the army was out of the question for someone with my family background, and no one would arrange a city job for me. So I decided to join the movement, thinking of it as an opportunity to broaden my horizons and strengthen my resolve. The further from home, the better. Most people from our area chose to go to Yunnan or Xinjiang, but I chose Inner Mongolia, along with my friend Wang Kaishuan. He was whiter and plumper than most, earning him the nickname Fatty. We were assigned to a place called Ganganjingzi, a name I had never heard before until we were informed of our destination. When we left home by train, no one came to see us off. Our departure as educated youth contrasted starkly with the warm farewells given to those joining the army. I only brought with me the book from the restroom roof, the 16-character Yin and Yang Feng Shui secret technique. I didn't know what the book was about, but it was the only thing left from my family, something to remind me of home,